Hey guys.
Right. Yeah, hi everyone. Just as we get started, I just want to let everyone know to please put your cameras off and be on mute. We'll just have the speakers with their cameras on. Perfect. Great. I can see everyone's going dark there. So perfect. Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Farah, and I'm the Partner Marketing Manager at Rewind, and I'll be your host today. This 1 hour masterclass is all about the 3 key elements for e-commerce agency success: people, process, and profit. There are no slides. It will be a free-flowing panel discussion centered around sharing insights and proven strategies. So if you have a question for our panelists, please just feel welcome to enter it into the chat. We'll either cover it during the discussion or at the end, depending on how it fits into the flow of the conversation. You guys are all doing a great job of this, but yeah, I mean, just other housekeeping items is just like make sure you stay on mute and you keep your camera off. So our panel includes Darren, who is the founder of Irish Titan, John, who's the founder of Avex e-commerce, and of course, Rachel, who is a well-recognized expert when it comes to scaling e-commerce agencies. So these 3 are e-commerce agency veterans who have definitely been around the block and have learned a thing or two when it comes to what works and what doesn't work. So with this group of panelists, you can be guaranteed of 3 things. Number 1 is you will laugh. Those of you who are following Rachel on LinkedIn, you've been fairly warned to expect shenanigans. Rachel, Darren, and John, they know each other very well and it shows. Number 2, you will cringe as they share some of the epic fails that they have seen and experienced. Or maybe you'll be nodding your head because you've been there too. And finally, you'll come away from this session with a ton of tips and winning strategies that you can implement right away at your agency to take your business to the next level. So before we dive in, I'll just let each of our panelists introduce themselves and share some more details about their background. And then after, I'll give a little introduction to myself as well. So let's start with Darren from Irish Titan.
Hi, everybody. I am Darren Lynch, founder of Irish Titan, as Farah mentioned. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Rachel and John, for having me part of the team. We're an e-commerce agency. I founded it in 2004, so we've been around for 17 years. We have 34 Titans, as we refer to our employees. We were previously all right here in Minneapolis. We have 1 down in Austin, Texas, as we're expanding geographically and opening up an office there. And we have 1 in New York City. We're closed only 2 days a year, St. Patrick's Day and the day after. That's my introduction.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. So, John, could you tell us a little bit about yourself now?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? I just plugged in my microphone, so I wasn't
Perfect.
100%. Okay. My name is John. I'm the founder at Avex. We are an e-commerce agency based out of New York City. We mostly focus on Shopify Plus, Klaviyo, as well as conversion rate optimization, creative, branding, content strategy, things like that. We've been an agency for about 5 or 6 years now or so. Started with just myself as a freelancer, grew to a few people for a couple years, and then over the last 2-3 years grew from about 3-4 people to about 30, and still going. So I have some experience on the kind of boutique side of starting and growing, especially an e-commerce agency.
Great. Thanks, John. So Rachel, can you tell us a bit about yourself and background?
Sure. Well, I'm sure most people are fed up with hearing me introduce myself, so I'll keep it short and sweet. I was COO of a leading plus agency, did that for a few years and scaled it pretty significantly, and then left to build my own business, which is now working with other agencies like Darren, like John, and helping them scale and implement systems, processes, and strategies just to take agencies to the next level.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. So now just a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Farah, and I'm the Partner Marketing Manager at Rewind. I've spent most of the past 11 years working in marketing within cybersecurity and SaaS, but I also have recent experience on the merchant side. And I was actually previously a Rewind Backups for Shopify customer. So for those of you who are not already using Rewind or familiar with it, it is the top rated backup and restore app for Shopify and BigCommerce. It essentially just becomes the undo button that these platforms don't come with out of the box. So we do this by automatically backing up your client's stores. And if something goes wrong, if the mistake is made, Rewind allows you to restore anything from a single image that may have been deleted to the entire store with just a few clicks. So big benefit for agencies. You don't have to waste, your team doesn't have to waste their time redoing lost work. And my role at Rewind is all about partnerships. We've partnered with hundreds of e-commerce agencies. And a couple of the perks of our partner program is you can earn referral bonuses for educating your clients about backups. And you can also generate leads through collaborating with my team on co-marketing initiatives. So if you're interested in joining, just reach out to me, or you can also reach out to Rachel and she can connect us. So now that we all know each other, let's just dive right into the discussion about how you can define your processes, empower your people, while keeping an eye on your profit. When the four of us were chatting earlier, preparing for today, John brought up a really good point about the first question that an agency needs to ask themselves, as it really defines what success looks like to them. So John, could you kick us off by telling us and sharing what this question is?
Sure. As Farah said, we were kind of discussing some of the topics and questions that we were going to go through, things like people, process, profits. And one thing that came up was the answers to those things could vary depending on the type of agency that you want to be. And that's something that I struggled with and sometimes still am, is figuring out if you want to be an agency that scales. Do you want to be a big agency, a medium-sized agency, or do you want to be a lifestyle agency? And it depends on, where you are in your stage is growing your business, whether you're the founder and you just want a lifestyle business of maybe 5 to 10 people, or you're looking to scale to 20, 30, 50, 100 people. Those different things are going to matter to you, and figuring out what type of agency you are and where you want to be in the future, you might want to approach those things differently. For example, I think profits, at any stage you need to be focusing on profits, but the where I was looking at profits and how we've defined profitability was very different from when we were 3 to 5 people to 30 people. People became a different challenge. I think once we hit about 20 people, 15, 20 people, it doesn't sound like a huge jump to go from like 8 people to 20 or 10 to 20, but there's like a switch that happens when you reach a certain amount where people becomes very important. I think the team that you're growing, the team that you have is always really important, but the requests that you're getting and the things that you may be focusing on as a founder and as a leader change, and the requests you might be getting from your teams change. They're looking at you as a different entity, whether it's early employees who started with the agency and those 2 to 3 people are still with you when you're 20, 30, 40 people, to the new people that you're bringing on, because someone who may have started with you 2, 3 years ago, they understand the struggles. They understand that you're still young. They understand that you're growing. But someone who just joined a 20 or 30 person team, they're going to look at you as you're a bigger company already. And they might be coming from a company that's more established. So they're going to have different types of expectations and different requests. So planning ahead for those things, I think, is extremely important. And same thing when it comes to process. Processes, in my opinion, need to be defined as soon as possible, and they need to change and grow and scale as you're growing. But one of those things was first starting off and figure out not only what type of agency do you want to be as far as size, lifestyle versus a scaling agency or a larger agency, as well as figuring out what type of services you're offering. Like, are you a wisdom agency? Like, are people engaging with you because you're consulting them and they want your knowledge? Are you a method agency because you have a specific process and a specific methodology, and that's what is attracting them? Is it a mix of both? Or are you more of utility? Are you just acting as an extension of their team to offset some of their like development work or design work, and you're really just billing per hour? So I think all three different things are going to have slightly different approaches. People, process, and profits are going to have slightly different approaches depending on what your goals are for an agency and also where you are today.
Rachel, why are you on mute?
Is this just me? Am I the only one that's going to be talking? That's fine. I could do that too.
I'm on mute to give Darren a chance to speak because he's very shy. That's why.
Right. So clearly the three of us are friends. Farah, thanks for kicking this off. John, I think your point of view around deciding what kind of agency you are and what kind of agency you want to be in both respects, right? Like size and scale versus the method agency, et cetera, is super important. And a lot of that starts with self-awareness and real self-awareness, because I think a lot of people, when you start a company, think, oh, I want to be the next Google, or I want to build an agency of hundreds of people, or things like that. And that may be true. And maybe you truly want to do that. And maybe you truly can do that. But that isn't a measure of success, right? Like when we talk about, when we introduce our companies and talk about headcount, for example, that's not meant to signal anything about how good we are at our jobs, other than to give a sense of perspective around some of the scale, some of the things we have maybe been through, et cetera. So if you want to, so I think you should be self-aware enough to identify whether you want to be a company of 10 and love that and be totally familiar and comfortable in that and proud, or try to build to a company of 50 or 100. And neither of those, or none of those, since I threw a bunch of options in there, are right or wrong. And you might evolve a little bit as you go through over time, but having a sense of self-awareness around that, the earlier you have that, the better you'll be. Because if you are going to go to a company of 50 people, you're going to go through some cycles, like John mentioned, where the kind of people you hire, 0 to 10, 1 to 10, I guess, because you always start with at least one, right? Some of those people might be different than the kind of people you hire from 10 to 20, and those might be different from 20 to 50. So some self-awareness of where you want to go and how you're going to define your success, I think, is really valuable, right? Because one of the things I heard that I really like a long time ago is revenue is vanity, profitability is sanity, cash is reality. And so you can have any one of those, and cash being the goal, right? Like you have to be cash flow positive, regardless of what stage you're at, and you just engineer for that. And that really drives the theme of this whole conversation around people, process, and profitability is driven by identifying where you are in that cycle.
And for me, on the other side of it, correct, you did very well, Darren. You read my notes accurately. For me, on the other side of it, I work with a lot of agencies of lots of different shapes and sizes. The typical agencies that I really love working with are that sweet spot of like 15 to like 30, 40 when you're really scaling, because that's when things really change. But I do work with and have worked with agencies that are significantly bigger. I worked with an agency recently on a project that is over 1,000 people, and their target is to hit 10% profit. And there's other agencies I know that are less than 10 people and they're doing around 70% profits. So it really depends. Just because you have a bigger agency and lots more people, that's a lot more mouths to feed. And I think for a lot of agencies, they realize really quickly when you have to keep chasing hires, especially the way the market is now, it's so fucking expensive. Like recruits, it's an employee market right now. Like there's just so much money out there. And it's not that fun, and you have to go through all the bullshit that comes with hiring a lot of people and taking care of a lot of people and everything that comes with all of that shit that I don't have to deal with because I have my own business and keep the numbers very small and lean. But it's not that fun. It's not for the faint-hearted. And there's some agencies, when I first started doing the work that I do, I came across a number of agencies and they're like, we don't want to be any more than 10 people. And I was just like, well, that's fucking weird. Why would you not want to keep growing? Now that I'm 2.5 years later in my business, coaching e-commerce agencies, I totally get it. Because it's not as fun as you think it is. And being somebody who was COO of an agency, obviously it wasn't my business. I didn't own it, but I was at the top running the business. But actually running a business and all of the headache and the heartache and the paranoia, John, that comes with it, it's tough. It is tough.
You have to be paranoid. In my opinion, being a little bit paranoid is good.
I know, but you say a little bit paranoid, but that's bullshit. I mean, you are.
Well, I'm neurotic.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's a few things both of you touched on that I think is really important. One of the ones Darren said was as far as like, why do you want, like if you're coming into growing an agency and you're maybe 5 people right now and you're like, well, I want a 50-person agency, is figuring out why do you want to be a 50-person agency? Is it only for, as Darren said, the vanity? Is it only for telling people you have a 50-person agency or competing? Because once you get to a certain size, you start playing in a different league, and you need to be prepared to play in that league, because the projects that we were pitching a year or 2 ago are insanely different. It's night and day. The expectations that the clients have, the types of projects being worked on are very, very different. And there's a lot more room for error. So you have to really figure out, why do you want to get to that certain size? Because, you're going to run into a lot of different problems, not only on the client side, but on the people side of things. Because like, now we're at a size where, and Darren can relate to this because he's advised me on this a little bit, where, we're hiring more senior people and they have different expectations. They're not just in it for salary. They're in it for, well, what's your company's mission? Where am I going to be in 5, 10, 15 years? Long-term incentive plans and putting money aside for certain things like that. When you start hiring more senior people, they have bigger expectations around the health benefits that you're offering. How is it covering their families? It's a very different conversation when we were younger and hiring younger employees who really didn't care about 401ks. They didn't care about benefits. They just wanted, a job to get experience. And, we've struggled with some of the things that we need to retain people. And more often than not, I've thought about in my head about just being like, I want to downgrade. I want to go back to being 10 people because I miss some of the things that I was doing when we were 10 people. And that goes to, what do you want to do? Do you want to manage people? Because the bigger you get, that's really what you're going to be doing. A lot of your job is managing people. Are you good with numbers? Do you want to just be in the numbers? Are you good on the execution side? Because once you get to a certain point, you're probably not going to be executing as much. You're not going to be strategy. You're not going to be designing or developing. Like, you need to realize that you need to step out of those things, unless you hire someone to run the business for you and you just work in it. But that's mostly the reason, not the reason why all of us are starting to grow agencies. And to Rachel's point too, is like, when you get to a certain size, you're going to be really focusing on retaining and finding talent. A lot of time is focusing on retaining and finding talent. And it's really tough out there right now to find talent. But yeah, and then just, more self-awareness as far as like, why do you want to grow this agency? Why? Maybe it's because you want to exit because you want more time. Is it more of a work-life balance thing? Do you want more time with your family? Because you're going to have to sacrifice that time in the beginning so that you could have it later on. But if you keep it as a lifestyle agency, you need to realize that you're probably going to be working in that job until you retire or until you move on to something else. Because the main goal for many people is to sacrifice your time early on so that you can exit, so you can reach maybe financial freedom or having more time with your family to work on some other things. So figuring out where you want to be is going to dictate how you manage people, how you look at profit, how you look at processes.
Yeah, and I think that, just to be clear, we're not trying to talk people out of targeting building a big agency. I just think that we hear a lot of agency owners talk to us who started an agency with the default assumption of building a big agency. And so that's one of the things that we are trying to challenge today in this conversation is what's that real purpose of your agency? If it's a lifestyle agency, so I saw someone chime in that they wanted to support their lifestyle. That is 100% okay, and that can be very profitable, right? Like I think that helps you define how you want to invest your resources, because if you're going to grow, to touch on some of John's top comments, if you're going to grow, you pay for that growth before that growth pays you, right? You pay for growth before growth pays you. And so examples of that are hiring people or onboarding new platforms that you think you can sell into, or whatever that might be. And so if you want to continue to literally grow headcount, that's great. Just be prepared for ongoing challenges that you'll have to continue to solve. And the bigger your agency becomes, the more you'll spend time on people. You'll have to. And so one of the things that I think can best frame a lot of this conversation between all three of us that are speaking and anybody who's listening and actually listening, not just signed in, muting us and doing their own thing, which we've all done in the last 18 months. Is this concept of these 5 leadership archetypes. And John and Rachel heard me talk about this before. I talk about it pretty frequently in a lot of the speaking that I do. And it's every leader / founder falls into 1, sometimes 2 of 5 archetypes: trailblazer, coach, architect, manager, tactician. And the trailblazer is sort of the crazy entrepreneur. He or she sees market trends and can capitalize on them. Half their ideas go up in flames, half kind of work, and then half, and I'm intentionally doing my math wrong, half work really well, right? So that's a trailblazer. Coach is someone who's good at communicating and inspiring people. Architect is someone who's good at putting together company structure and plan, and not necessarily details, but like strategy and that sort of stuff. And strategy is different than vision, just to be clear. Manager is someone who's good at instilling a culture of accountability, and tactician is someone who's good at whatever it is the company does. And a lot of founders in our world are tacticians. They're devs, they're designers, they're strategists, marketers. And so if that is you, then at the beginning, regardless of which of 5 archetypes you are, at the beginning, you're going to have to wear at least 3, if not 4 or 5 of those hats, because you're the founder and you have to do all those until you can hire out. But if you're a tactician, since many of us are, then technically I'm not a tactician because I'm not a dev or designer. But anyway, if you're a tactician, being self-aware of that and then figuring out, even if you're going to be 10 to 12 people, how you start to offload some of the trailblazer, architect, coach, manager responsibilities will make your life much, much better and make that lifestyle agency much, much more profitable. If you're going to grow to 20 or 50, being aware of which of those five archetypes you are is also super valuable, because that's how you build out a management team, is starting to carve out those first roles where you are most ill-suited, or said differently, a complete disaster. So I think
or you just don't like. In some cases, you just don't like. And I think for the work that I do with a lot of agencies, is to really, as entrepreneurs, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable doing shit that we don't like doing. That's just the reality of being an entrepreneur. I fucking hate finances, but I have to do it. I hate sending out invoices, but I have to fucking do it. So it's all this sort of stuff that I hate doing that I have to do because I run a business. But the reality of running an agency is, you should, as an agency owner, you should be looking at the stuff you're doing that perhaps you're not very good at, and then just kind of putting your ego to one side, whatever you're not very good at or what you just don't really enjoy doing. In most cases, from my experience, I have rarely met any agency owners that love doing process. I rarely come across, because agency owners typically are visionaries, and they're people that have this vision, they have this dream, they have this skill. When it comes to actually detailing it and doing the nuts and bolts of it, I feel like John is probably a little bit of an exception. I don't know that, John, that you love doing process, but you do make process, like, you have prioritized it pretty early in your agency.
We did prioritize it, and I could get to that in a second. But I'm realizing more and more that I don't want to do anything.
For sure. Every single conversation I have with John is just like, I just want to do less. How can I do less, Rachel?
Do less. I kind of, and this is some of the things that if I could have gone back in time, I would have done. And this is kind of a little bit off of what Darren said when it comes to figuring out what type of leadership you are and who's going to fill those gaps. I do wish that I would have earlier on brought on more management level people who could grow into certain roles that could have shared the burden with me, because I'm a sole founder and a lot of it fell on me. And until recently, we didn't really have more senior people who could pick up the slack until the past year or so, or less. And we're still focusing on developing leadership, bringing on managing directors or, director of this, director of that. There's a few holes that we still need to fill that me and some other team members are picking up on. But I do wish that I would have gotten some managers earlier on and removed myself from certain things sooner rather than later. And again, this is going to be based off of what type of business you want to run. If it's a lifestyle business where you just want to say, hey, look, I want to be involved in projects, but I also want to be able to take off 2-3 weeks at a time. But the smaller you are and the busier you get, the less time you could actually do if you're still executing. If the business relies on you to exist, you're really most likely not at a point where you could go away for 3 months if you wanted to and just let it go. Some can with just a few employees, but then you do need people who are a bit more senior to kind of pick up where you are. And then also identifying, and I heard this in a book, so I'm stealing it from someone, I just don't remember where, is figuring out what types of project you are going after. Are you an elephant hunter or a rabbit hunter? One of them is, if you're an elephant hunter, you're going after fewer, larger projects. If you're a rabbit hunter, you're going after volume, you're going after a lot of smaller projects. And I think that is going to impact too how you approach your agency's growth. How the webinar next hour.
Restaurant booked it.
What time are you booked already?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay.
I will use.
And how you might approach. Yeah, sounds good, Morgan. So we that's going to determine how you approach those processes too. So to Rachel's question, as far as processes go, we actually focused on them very early on, and I did it really poorly. So what I would do is I would hire somebody and I would write a rough process in a Google Doc and basically just throw them into it. And if they messed up, they learned from it. I found that to get really good results out of that. But one of the things I did was gave them a rough process. And this was for our project manager at the time, who now is our director of operations. I made her identify where there were holes in that process and have her kind of create her own processes from there. And from 2-3 years ago till now, those processes have grown to a massive documentation in Notion. We have everything documented, from onboarding new hires, onboarding clients, our complete process for delivery, everything down to like sending SOWs, time off, like every single thing that anyone would do in the agency is documented. And this has been a growing document for a long time. And the quicker you could start documenting those processes, the less you start doing the stuff that you don't want to do. And if it's going to help more support your lifestyle, whether it's a big agency or smaller agency, you need to have those processes in place. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing the same, like, smaller tasks every day. So you need to be able to delegate those and make sure that it's documented somewhere, even whether you're one person or 100 people. And the sooner you could do that, the better.
Yeah. Couple of things that I'll chime in on. First, the elephant rabbit comment, then I'll circle back to one of the things that I think I failed miserably on, amongst probably many. I think that there's that concept of hunting elephants, which clearly makes sense, right? Like, I think that the analogy I always have, some of this, I have a whole bunch of half-finished sentences. Let me start over. So the first thing to think about is your resource model, because your resource model is going to drive a lot of your costing, right? So for me, here at Irish Titan, with a Titan-only model, as we like to say, again, that means we're doing all of our work with just our employees. So I have to have enough work to keep them busy and have enough Titans to do all the work in order to be profitable, to sort of oversimplify how the P&L is going to flow, right? So the analogy I've always used is if you go to the beach with a jar, the way to fill that up is to put in big rocks first, small rocks second, sand, and then water, right? That's how you fill that jar. That's how you maximize your revenue and your profit, by filling that jar. So if we translate that to the elephant rabbit hunting, one of the sayings I heard that I liked a lot is aim for elephants, avoid rabbits, and you'll get a whole ton of gazelles. You'll get maybe an elephant or two and a few rabbits. And that's how you have a full table, right? So if you're going to be hunting rabbits, it is more of a volume game, which was one of the questions around if you're just going to be lower margin. Not necessarily, probably, than if you're hunting elephants. But if you're hunting elephants, you got to go hunt an elephant, then you got to service it. And then you got to go hunt another elephant, and then you got to service it. So if you're going to be hunting multiple elephants, you got to have a sales team, a delivery team. That's a good example of paying for that growth before that growth pays you.
I would also, I just jump in there, Dan. I would also say when it comes to people and profit, I work with one agency. He's in our group, Startup Slang, and he gets a lot of his business through Fiverr and Upwork. It's much smaller, but it's significantly high volume. And that's an agency I actually work with as a director of operations. So I'm heavily involved in all of the chaos that comes with a high volume business. The impact that has from a profitability point of view. Cash flow is good because it's constant, but it's little. But in many cases, especially at this time of year when projects are quieter, closes aren't happening as frequently over summer period, which is pretty common for the e-commerce industry. This year, I think more than the last couple of years, but you're basically chasing that money all the time just to kind of stay ahead when things are quieter. And then I work with other agencies where I have one agency I work with and they bring in 4 or 6 new clients a year. And the problem is between payment milestones, things are quiet. Now, obviously for me, because I eat, sleep and breathe retention. I think the entire ecosystem for e-commerce is all about retention, retaining your team and in retaining your clients. If you have a solid retainer model in place, you can kind of weather the storm, whether it is rabbits or elephants.
Yeah, I there's a couple of really good questions in there that I'd like to get to as well, but a few comments on, and we're really going deep on these elephants and rabbits, but I think it's worth pointing out that the elephants that we were hunting like 2 years ago or a year ago are kind of the rabbits that we're ignoring now sometimes. So that's going to change over time as your agency grows. When we still do take on smaller projects, that's, we need, sometimes we have the bandwidth and it's a cool client or something, we could take them on even though they're small. And to be honest, some of the projects that we take on, they're really small. The profit margins are better in some cases, not in all cases, but there's different problems with both of them as well. When you're dealing with the smaller, like startup kind of companies or smaller projects, there's a bit less risk when it comes to the delivery. There's there's lower margin, so there might be some more room for error there. Most of the time you're dealing with founders who are really vested in there. So like there's the old saying, like, someone who's paying you $5,000 versus $50,000. Usually the $50,000 client is just like pays on time and there's less issues. And then like the $5,000 client thinks you're like their full-time employee forever, right? So there's a lot of expectations that need to be set there, but there's different ways that you're going to have to navigate once you start with some of these like really big, larger clients. Like there's all this insurance that you need to get, these vendor agreements, these MSAs. Like we've worked with some like large companies that have hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of employees, or like they're doing billions of dollars, and you don't get to send them a contract. They send you a contract, and there's stuff in there that will literally make your head spin. Like this was actually pre-pandemic. We worked with this enterprise company, and there was a clause in there asking what our pandemic response plan was. And this was pre-COVID. asking if there was a pandemic, what would our response plan be to ensure that we could continue to work on the project? And I was like, oh, that's never going to happen. And well, we needed a pandemic response plan. Luckily, they didn't like throw that MSA in our face and say, well, you're late on this project. Now you have to pay us because you didn't have a pandemic response plan. But there's crazy stuff that's still happening in there. And you do need to make that decision whether you want to go that route. But to Darren's point, yeah, you could still work on the smaller projects and some of the larger projects. It's not like you can't. But that's going to affect process too, because we have a completely different process for our smaller clients that allows us to be profitable there. And it's also about matching the right people to those projects. We're not going to put a junior project manager and a junior team on an extremely large project that is, high risk, and vice versa. It just won't work that way because it won't be profitable either way. So our processes are different, and actually some of our products and our delivery systems are different depending if we're going after an extremely large client or a small client. So your sales process changes too. So all of that ripples down, because then you need more employees, more specialized employees for certain things, and you need different agreements, different ways to approach them, and all that impacts the bottom line too. So you need to be able to plan for some of those things. So hopefully I answered some of those questions that were in the things, but if there's any specific ones, happy for any of us to focus on those.
Yeah, I think one, like while we're still on the topic of like rabbits and elephants, is one question from the chat is, how do you hunt your first elephants?
Okay, I'll
John, I was going to
keep
say,
talking, but
you spoke about that recently with a couple of agencies in our group.
Yeah. So to me, so we've worked with some larger brands like Hugo Boss and Enjoy Life, who's under Mondelez, Kith, Simmons Serta Bedding, and a lot of brands in between, a lot of good D2C brands. But how we've landed like large brands was a really good case study. If you don't have a really solid case study, it's going to be very difficult. Like the reason why we've worked with like Hugo Boss or Undefeated or some of the other like clothing brands that we work with was because one of our early clients was Kith. That is a case study that's been like kind of a key case study for us, because we were able to, and we worked with them a few years ago to rebuild their website or do UX UI design, some mobile stuff for them. Without that case study, we probably wouldn't have landed of the vast majority of some of the fashion brands over the past few years. That case study is what literally got us in the door with a lot of them. And I would say it's a little bit of luck, but it was also because it's networking. So I was able to get in with a subsidiary or a partner company of Kith's, doing some work for them really cheap and affordably. Like I did the work. Like I networked with them and did some work for, this was when I was still freelancing. So I like kind of didn't make any money off of it, but that led to Kith. And then we pumped that case study up. So you really need to be able to have a case study, because someone like a really large brand that's going to give you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, or they're going to sign a 2-year agreement with you for tens of thousands of dollars per month, or they're going to trust you with your business. The number one thing big businesses are worried about is making them look bad, because when you're dealing with a big business, you're 100% not dealing with the founder. You're not dealing with the C-level person. You're probably dealing with, maybe you're dealing with the CMO, but most likely you're dealing with a marketing person that if they hire the wrong person, they could get fired. And they want to be able to stay within budget, and they want to make sure that they're limiting their risk. And why you have to convince them, why are they going to hire you over a market leader that has 200 employees? They're not. They're just not. Unless you could prove to them that you're going to not make them look bad, and you're going to be able to deliver on it. There could be something like going back to whether you're a method agency or whether you're a specialist. You might specialize in something that the market leaders are not specializing in, or you have a certain methodology that they're really interested in. But if you're, doing design, development, and marketing or something, you need to be able to back that up with a case study and evidence that you're not going to make them look bad.
Rachel, you are a case study Jedi and diva.
The diva's got nothing to do with the case study. I earned that, but go on.
So I see that there's a couple of questions in here about case studies. You should answer those, because you are, in my mind, actually like the case study Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing case studies. I've been doing content for more than 10 years, and I was still writing case studies for Magento up until about 18 months ago. Case studies are going to, like John said, they're going to make or break the growth of your agency, because ultimately a case study is your shop window for a potential prospect of what it looks like to work with you. So what makes a good case study? Ultimately, what makes a case study is telling a good story. There needs to be good detail in there, and really understanding before you create the case study, what is your purpose? What are you trying to communicate? What pain point are you trying to identify? And really good case studies. So for example, the one that John did, which is the Kith one, is pretty much an evergreen case study now, because it's always bringing in customers. But a good case study is one that's going to be updated over time. And good case studies that bring in consistently big leads are ones that show that an agency is able to work with a client over a longer period of time and have a long-term relationship and still continue to bring value and drive results. So ultimately, good case studies, identifying the pain points, whatever the key technologies or key verticals. So if it's a specific industry, a specific pain point, a specific type of technology. For example, Avex, they work with a tech partner called Dynamic Yield, and have done quite a few good projects with them over recent months. So doing case studies specific to that type of technology is going to target exactly the kind of customer who is looking at that solution. And by looking at that solution, from an agency point of view, we can already identify what's the pain point of that customer. Why would they want to use dynamic yields? You already know what their pain point is. So you can basically craft and manipulate your story in a way that speaks to their pain point, as if you're writing it just for them. So I think people overcomplicate case studies. And I think case studies, a lot of times, they really glorify the merchant and telling the stories like, I don't give a fuck about the story of the merchant. Like, it doesn't really matter. I just want to know where they were hurting and how you fixed them. And data, you need data. You need to actually have something tangible, some sort of metrics, something that's like speaks to their bottom line of how you helped improve. That's ultimately what we're in business for. I need to be able to show you that I increased growth by X%. And if that's what you're looking for, then come and talk to me.
I agree with that, and I think it's just to be careful about.
Disagree? Is that what you were just about?
I agree with all of that, but one thing that I want to not miss, because we've experienced this, is that you mentioned that you have to have data for a lot of these things. And I don't know how many agencies are out there that are just creative agencies, but a large portion of what we do is creative. One thing that I wouldn't say this is a mistake, it's just something that we need to do a little bit better. We do a lot of CRO, we do have data, we do have ways that we've improved results, but sometimes we've been pitching to clients and they don't give a shit about data. They don't even care about increasing their revenue. They just want to look cool and they want our creative. But we're talking about data and the results we drove for all of these brands. They want to see how creative we were and how our design sense. So if you are leaning more on the creative side and you're doing branding and you're doing like, sometimes the data, I'm not saying it's not important, but you have to know when to be able to show that data and when they're just going to glaze over and not care about the data. You know, if you're pitching marketing, that's different.
Right? It doesn't necessarily mean data that's about like actual bottom line, but if it's something they want something more engaging and more creative, then you pick a metric that speaks to what they're looking for. And a metric in this case is going to be engagement, how long bounce rate
and presence.
And then the other thing to keep in mind with case studies too is no case study is going to answer every question that you're going to get in the sales process, even from a single prospect. And so, because if it did, it'd be so long that it'd be completely boring and not engaging and easy to digest. Because I think one of the best summaries of what a good case study should be is easily digestible, right? Like the story should be quick and easy for people to understand. The metrics and numbers should be, if they're there, should be easy for them to see and understand. Because if they have to, it's not a white paper. A case study is not a white paper. And so if you're doing a big complex build, for example, that has integrations and sophisticated UX and all of those components around how the site's being built for acquisition, conversion, and retention strategies, you're not gonna be able to do a case study on that. You might need to do multiple case studies if you wanna commit to that. But the point that I'm trying to make, I didn't get to the point very quickly, is you still need to expect you or your salespeople to be able to actually communicate what was done in the project, right? Because a case study does not substitute for that.
So yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things that we do to craft our case studies is we have like an associate marketing person who does like the copy and things like that. But I used to just write all the copy for case studies, but now there's some projects I don't even know the ins and outs of them. So this serves as like a few purposes, but at the end of a project, the project manager's task is to fill out a post-mortem document. This post-mortem document allows us to then do a post-mortem on the project to talk about it. But all of the questions that are asked in there's a lot of questions that are about the project and what we did and what was successful about it, and what the results were and things like that. So that is what the marketing team then also utilizes to turn into a case study. So it's just part of the process. And of course, we then build upon it from there. But it also allows salespeople to learn exactly what we did, because it's coming from the project manager too, who is executing on that. So it is important to be able to talk about not only what we did, but the results that came out of it.
And one of the questions here actually is, so talking about case studies, the actual promotion, because I know this is a big topic right now. I have a private mastermind, which John and Darren are both part of, along with a couple of other people here that are on the webinar. And a big topic right now is agency marketing, like actually putting effort into marketing your own agency to drive the kind of customers you want. So one of the questions here from Adrian is, how do you really make use of that case study? Are you organically reaching out to people? Are you doing webinars? Is it cold? How do you really get that, killer or evergreen case study out in front of your ideal customer?
For us, I think an important distinction is we don't lead with case studies. So we create demand through how we structure our site, make it searchable, through face of the company events, through 3 teams that we have, and this might be a worthwhile topic. We have a sales team that includes 1 outbound person and then 2 inbound senior people that help shape the engagements, et cetera. So that's our sales team. We have a person solely responsible for our marketing. They don't do client-facing work. They do our marketing. So our newsletter, our site, our social content, our case studies. Jack Swift, if he's listening, that's his real name. He's not just a nursery rhyme character. He's our marketing person. And so he creates all of our content. And then we actually have a channel person, Becky Koberger. She's our New York Titan. And so she is tasked with working with our partners and does the cadence calls, scorecards, work with them on event marketing, et cetera. So those are all of the tools at a high level, all the Titans really, I should say, because I kind of went through the people, because people are what really drives this. And we leverage technology, right? But it's people that are doing it. That's what creates the demand. And then we use the case studies sometimes in some of those campaigns, but sometimes not until after we're already in a conversation with somebody. So again, I think I'm reinforcing too that notion that case studies supplement your sales process. They supplement sales conversations. They rarely replace them.
Yeah. I could share some of, I honestly, I think we could step up our marketing a bunch. So I'm probably not the best to talk about that. We do blogs, we do the podcast, we do case studies, we do things like that. A lot of posting on LinkedIn and stuff, but we need to step it up. So some of the things that haven't worked and some of the things that have worked for us to push our case studies, and same thing with Darren, we don't essentially lead with case studies. They become part of the conversation once we start to, have some demand, and then we pitch them. But in some cases, we have tried to push the case studies. One thing that did not work is running like paid ads. We ran some paid ads for case studies for some lead generation. For us personally, that didn't work. Cold emailing, we've had mixed results. We have done that before. And where it really works is that if we have like 3 really solid fashion case studies, which we have, or like a really good CPG case study, if you hit the right CPG pair at the right time and they see some names in that email and links to case studies that they are brands that they want to be like, it has been some easy sales. But I don't think, depending on what your services are, for us specifically, like, look, there's a lot of Shopify Plus agencies. There's a lot of Klaviyo agencies, a lot of design agencies. They're not going to respond to our email unless we have a killer case study in that jumps out to them. And that's where we've kind of had some successes and some failures. But to Darren's point, like, once we engage with the client and there's demand there, then it's more like, we're able to show and walk through our case studies. And of course, putting it on your website and having organic reach has helped out a lot for us.
And I would honestly encourage anybody who has any questions about case studies to reach out to Rachel. We could talk all day about case studies, but she really is a Jedi on this. So I'd reach out to her for additional insights.
And just, you can charge it back to Darren.
Right. And I'll pay her with a two-party post-dated out-of-state check, which nobody even really, I think that's from Fletch, which most people on here are too young to even see. Okay, perfect. And so one other topic I want to circle back to are some of our failings. I think we all learn from that, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we talked about earlier were people, and we talked about HR and that sort of stuff. And I think something to tie all that together is one of the things that I did not do well is really identify the HR needs that I needed out of our leaders and our organization. And I'll start by clarifying, I think in its simplest form, HR has two goals. One is HR administration, and the other is HR career management. And so there's probably better titles for that. I'm not an HR expert because I'd be awful at it. But the HR administration side of it, no matter what size you are, you have that. If you have a single employee, you have that. Because you have the employee onboarding, the paperwork, payroll, excuse me, all of that, benefits administration, all of that is HR administration. And somebody has to do that, whether it's you or like your dev manager or your creative manager or an office manager, somebody has to be doing that. As you grow, that stuff's going to continue. But as John kicked us off with, your employees are going to start to expect things, right? They're going to want to feel engaged. I think that people want three things at work, and I'm ripping this off from that book Drive by Daniel Pink. People want mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Those are the three things. And so how do you provide that? You have to provide that in order to retain them, which Rachel's talked about a lot, about how important it is to retain your talent. That's the career side of HR, right? What are people's career paths? How are they getting feedback via one-on-ones? Are you doing 360-degree reviews? How are you sharing performance? How are you sharing company vision? All of that sort of stuff. That's the career path side of it, and someone has to be doing that. And one of the things I failed to recognize early was the distinction between the two and the necessity of, so we don't have an HR director. I have an office manager. She handles all of the HR administration stuff, and she's great with that. I and our management team handle all of the career side of HR, the reviews, the hiring, the firing, if we need to, which we rarely do. If you hire well, you don't have to fire a lot, but all of that performance management, career path, feedback, all of that is on the responsibility of my management team. And the first iteration that I had with my management team, I didn't recognize that, so I wasn't clear about that. And that caused a lot of problems during some of those times.
Yeah, we similar. We don't have an HR person, but we are considering a hire there because, and there's pros and cons to that too. But similar, I handle some HR stuff when it comes to performance reviews and culture and things like that. So does our director of operations. So does our director of client services. And we use a PEO that really helps out with a lot of the administrative side of things. So like, there's not much to do on the payroll and like PTO side of things. So like, we don't really need as much at this size, like someone on the admin side. We do the performance reviews, the feedback from employees, especially the junior employees. One of the biggest things is like junior employees really wanted feedback and performance reviews where they could improve. Because if you think about it, they're really early on in their career and they're not only they're looking at you as a stepping stone a lot of times. Like a lot of the, some of the junior employees have grown into bigger roles with me, but like a lot of times they know that they're not going to be there forever, or nor do they want to be. And maybe they want to change career paths, but they want to get as much as they can out of the experience. So performance reviews and all of those things are beneficial to both sides. And I'm learning more and more. Like, I didn't give a shit about them when I was an employee, but I was a shit employee. That's why I'm a entrepreneur. But I didn't care what anyone was telling me. I'm doing my own thing. I'm going to clock out, and I don't really care about my performance review. But nowadays, like all of our employees care about performance reviews, and they want to know what we think, where they can improve, and get as much feedback as possible, which is something Rachel knows I love doing. But I really don't. One of the questions in there was, because I have a hard stop at 12 and I wanted to make sure to answer this. How do you encourage staff to be more productive from working from home? That is really tough, and a lot of agencies are struggling with that. We are really struggling with that. Do we know if they're productive at home? We hope they are. They're booking hours, they're doing client work. I think that's a bigger question of, how do you keep your employees engaged in general and thinking about the agency? They're not going to think about it as you as a founder, or if you're on the management level, they're not going to think about it like that. What you need to do is establish a really great culture and expectations, and understanding, like, if they're not performing, why aren't they engaged? Because are you giving them shit work to do? Is it boring work? Is it exciting? Is it not? Maybe you don't have the right person if they're not engaged. But you're not going to get someone who's doing like 40 hours straight at home. There's going to be some downtime, and that's expected. But you need to kind of take a step back and think about the culture that you're creating, and the type of environment that you're creating when they are working. You want to keep them engaged and keep them excited, because it's so easy for a remote employee to just be like, oh, this other company is offering me $5,000 more a year. All I have to do is close my laptop and open it the next morning, and I'm doing the same job in the same place, just making $5,000 more a year. So there's a lot of incentives that needs to happen, especially with everyone being remote right now, or most people.
To bounce off of John, because I know we have a stop here in a second. I think the question to start with is to look at yourself, and are you worried about your remote employees' productivity, or are you worried about their engagement? So those are two different things. And if you aren't getting the productivity, what metrics do you have in place? What clarity have you communicated about your expectations of remote employees? If productivity is there, but you're worried about their engagement because either you're worried about or you're feeling disengagement, et cetera, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And I think that's a great discussion. I don't know that if we have time, which technically I think we don't, since we're at time.
Yeah, I have a minute.
John's got a hard stop because he's a very important person, so we'll relieve him of his duties. He said he's here for a good time, not a long time.
It's supposed to be 60 minutes. Yeah, I have to run, but I would touch on the last question as far as when hiring a junior employee, what makes one stand out from another. I guess it depends on what we're defining as a junior employee. Again, earlier days when we were a few people, we made a really big mistake that Rachel knows. We hired junior people because we were going to train them to step up and start being, and look, we could only afford junior people because we were a much smaller agency. I would say with 100% accuracy, all of the junior people that started with us a while back have left. And the thing is, those junior people did not leave to take on the same position at another agency. They either went on the brand side because they weren't happy with the agency, or they went to a different position within the agency. And we made the mistake because they weren't ready to be able to work on the types of projects that we needed them to work on. So just be careful when hiring junior people. What did I look for in junior people that really stood out? And honestly, it's hard in the hiring process to identify this. Darren could definitely speak to that. He probably has a much better process for it than me. But what I did notice, employees that we did hire in the earlier days that were junior that stayed on, is they really cared about just taking something that we would give to them and making it their own. They were not even asking a lot of questions. And the questions that they did ask were important questions. The junior employees that really needed you to hold their hand and wanted to learn were the ones that stayed for a year and took that as an opportunity to find something else that they wanted to do because they were just exploring opportunities. The ones that really take the time to make something their own, our junior project manager that started me a few years ago is now our director of operations, and she's killing it because she took and made it her own. She really cared about the ins and outs of the business. So maybe ask those questions as if they did that in another agency, or, I don't know how to identify that early on. Darren has a better hiring process than I do. My hiring process is shit. It was shit. Now it's better.
It's better.
We
Right,
have a
John,
good
we'll
team
let
now.
you go, and we'll let Darren have his big frothy finish that he likes to end with.
Yeah.
On.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Go on, Darren. Final words of wisdom about hiring and junior people.
So I think in the earlier stages of a company, I don't know if this will be a big frothy finish, but we'll try to penetrate the topic here. So I think in the early stages of your company, I think you do hire for talent more than experience, because experience generally costs more. And at the beginning, you generally don't have the funds, nor should you spend more when at the beginning of your company, you're at a stage where you don't yet know a lot of things. You might be a seasoned business person, but if you're just starting your company, the market's going to take you places. And one of the sayings I heard a long time ago that I 100% agree with, because I've experienced it, is businesses go through 3 stages. At first, you're everything to everybody because you need a check to keep the lights on. Second phase, you're something for everybody. You know what you do, not necessarily yet who you do it for. Third phase, you're something for somebody. You know what you do and who you do it for. So at the beginning, it actually makes more sense to hire based more on talent than experience, because you're going to be figuring shit out as you go along. You sort of need everybody to be a Jack or Jill of all trades, master of some. And so as you progress, that's when you start to complement some of them with people of experience. Some of those people leave for your shortcomings, right? Because maybe you didn't distinguish the HR admin, career path sort of stuff early enough, and now they're not getting that. Some of them leave because they're wired for a 1 to 10 person sort of company. And so they're going to go to the next 1 to 10 person company. So that's more attrition than turnover. That's just organic departures. So I just think that you need to keep some of that stuff in mind. And over time, what's really important to think about is how you start to complement yourself and your management team with some model. The model I use are those 5 archetypes that I talked about: trailblazer, coach, architect, manager, tactician. Find a model so that you can relate to that and figure out how to surround yourself with complementary talent. And then also get a sense of what you need to trust in people, right? Because over time, it's more important to hire and retain based on trust than it is on performance. And there's this matrix. I won't spend our time drawing it, but there's a matrix that has kind of a 4x4. I changed it. I have 5 pieces to it. The people that you trust more, those are the people you want to retain more. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a high performer, low trust person, they're a cancer, and you want to stay away from those. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something we can talk about more in the future. That's my big frothy finish.
That's your big frothy finish. Okay, fantastic. And I'll just round up here just before hand it back over to Farah. For me, being on the other side of it, working with nutcases like John and Darren, one of the things that I've noticed is having clarity in where you're going or getting that sense of direction. Some people have it better than others. Darren is 17 years into his agency, so he's much further along with that thought process and sense of vision. A lot of agencies, when they're starting out, there is no structure, there is no clarity. A lot of agencies I speak to that have gone from 15 to 35 people in the last year or since COVID, they don't have an org chart. They've got no company structure. They've got no standard operating procedures. They've got no processes really documented. And it's typically one person at the top who is, everything goes through them. So I would say no matter what size your business is, you need to have a look at what your structure looks like, what the career plans look like for those key roles in the company, and roughly where it is that you're trying to get to in terms of money, profit, revenue, whatever. A lot of the stuff that John touched on earlier that I work with him on is org charts, is numbers, is finances, is percentages in terms of profits. And if we're going to get here, what do we need in terms of people? What processes need to change? And to basically work back from there. So that would be the advice that I would give to any agency in spite of your size, whether you're just starting or you're bigger and you're growing pretty quickly. If you want a lifestyle agency or a scaling agency, you need to have that sense of structure to really make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that you can avoid. Farah, over to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of summed it up and kind of brought us back to our initial discussion at the beginning too. So thanks, Rachel. We're a little bit beyond our time. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us.
We'll blame John. We'll blame John.
Yeah, I know he's such a nightmare. He just wanted to make it all about him.
I don't know. I think you guys are all at fault a little bit, but
I want to add one more comment. Brett Hart.
Oh.
Brett the Hitman Hart that I'm seeing here. I love your professional wrestling career, so I'm a big fan.
Great. Just wanted to thank everyone for joining, and I hope everyone came away with some like useful tips and strategies and ideas that they can start implementing at their agency. And this session is going to be recorded, so maybe Rachel, you can tell us about kind of next steps, what to expect.
Yeah, of course. So this is recorded. I'm going to send around a recording once Sebastian gets it edited and uploaded on YouTube. I will probably pull a couple of templates of case studies that I typically share with agencies. So everybody in the group can have an example of a case study template they can work on. And this will be uploaded on YouTube. I believe next month we're going to have another follow-up webinar. And that webinar is going to be dedicated to like an AMA. Whether I bring back Darren and John again is anybody's guess, because wrangling those two wild horses is quite difficult. So we're going to do an AMA, I think, the end of September. And what I'm going to do is collate a lot of these questions that I have here, stuff that didn't get answered, and use that to kind of inform that one. And then once a month, then I have a round table, which is very much like this format. We pick a topic and then we kind of go round the virtual room and discuss this. But if there's any questions that people have, any follow-up questions, then they're more than welcome. Typically with these kind of events, it's just keeping the conversation going. For me, starting this business was really to create a community for agency owners, because I was in London running an agency that we didn't have this community, and it was very kind of hush hush. Nobody shared anything with each other. And it was really difficult to know whether I was really fucking up with my sales deck or if I lost pitches because it was too expensive. Like I didn't really know. It was just kind of flying blind. So to create a community where I have people like Darren and John in a group together, and they're sharing their org charts and their documentation and their pricing models and how they're scaling their agencies and how they're measuring profitability. It's really empowering for some of the other agencies in there to learn from them. So keep the conversations coming. Send me any questions you have if you want me to take a look at any stuff, and reach out to Farah, Darren, John, whatever directly. I'll include them in the email follow-up with their LinkedIn so you can get in touch with them. Don't expect Darren to get back to you. Me and Darren are really close friends, and he never fucking messages me back, so.
Yeah, but that's why I don't message you back.
Great. Excellent.
All right. We good?
All right. Well, thanks for staying over for people that could.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Farah.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was fun.
Bye.
See ya.